Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, finally we are going to talk about the issue of Bitcoin. So many have asked me in the past, talk about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, what's the ruling, etc. I've had many questions on this specific issue. So I don't know if many of you remember, but a while back, a few years back actually, whilst I was still studying in Medina, I actually posted a research paper by a sheikh on the issue of Bitcoin. And actually at the time it gained some traction. A lot of people were sharing it. I imagine because there wasn't a lot of material and research by the scholars that was available and accessible to the public at the time. What I did actually was I translated the main points of the research paper into English. And many, subhanallah, found this to be interesting. And I got a lot of good feedback on that issue. And the reason why I was so interested in translating the main points of this research paper and posting it online was the fact that I had actually gotten it at the Kulli, at the Faculty of Shariah, and it was written by one of the mashayikh, yani the teacher of my teacher. So at the time what happened is I was in class and my teacher was mentioning that his sheikh had actually written a research paper on Bitcoin, and I found that to be interesting. So I went up to him, I asked the sheikh, yani, can you get me this research paper that was written by your sheikh? So that's what he did. Yani he sent me the PDF and I found that very interesting. So I read it and subhanAllah, I actually found that it was a very well-researched and well-written paper. So I'll post the link to that research paper in the description, inshallah ta'ala. For those who want to read it, it's in Arabic, though I will also post the points that I translated into English. And the research paper is really about the rulings related to Bitcoin. The Sheikh doesn't really go too deep into the actual ruling of Bitcoin itself and of cryptocurrencies. It's almost as if the premise of his research paper is based on the fact that Bitcoin is permissible and that cryptocurrencies are permissible and that they are accepted currencies that are now found throughout the world and people have accepted them and even governments now have started accepting them, etc. So he really bases his research paper on that and he goes into details regarding the rulings related to Bitcoin. That being said, what we will briefly discuss, inshallah ta'ala, today is the actual ruling of Bitcoin, whether it's permissible or not. And as for the details, then you can check the link in the description for that without a problem. So because this is like a new issue that did not exist in the past, yani cryptocurrencies, this is something new, something scholars have to research, something where they have to do ijtihad and come to, their own independent conclusion based on the evidence. So because of that, then yes, we can say that there is a khilaf on Bitcoin because we find many varying opinions, and I guess we can say that the opinions are three. Number one, some scholars say that it is haram, yani not permissible, and this is the opinion of many.
ولذلك اختلف في حكمها العلماء المعاصرون، فمنهم من أجاز تداولها ومنهم من منع.
Then you have the opinion that it is halal, permissible. And again, you will find many of the scholars that hold this opinion, and inshallah ta'ala we'll speak about that as well. And the third opinion we can say is something we call a tawaqquf, yani to remain neutral, to not take a position. And many of the scholars do this because it is such a new issue, because they need to research, because they're not really sure what Bitcoin is all about. They don't take an actual position and they'll say, well, maybe later, or I'll research this issue more in depth, etc. So they don't have an actual position. This is called a tawaqquf, neutrality. So the question is, what are the evidences to say, for example, that it is haram? So here you'll find different arguments. Can it really be called a currency, for example? What is it based on? What is it backed up by? The fact that it fluctuates too much, it's not stable. One day it'll be $10,000, for example, one Bitcoin will be $10,000, and then a few days later it'll be like $30,000, it goes up, goes down, etc. The fact that users can be anonymous, users of Bitcoin, the fact that it's not regulated by government, all of these are arguments to say that it is not permissible.
العملات الرقمية كالبيتكوين لا يجوز التعامل فيها، فليست لها أرصدة في البنوك وليست معتمدة لدى أكثر دول العالم.
البنوك المركزية في جميع الدول ما تبنت هذه العملات الرقمية، ولذلك الذي يظهر لي المنع.
وعليه أنا أفتي بأنه لا يجوز التعامل بها ما دامت على حالها الموجود.
Then you have the scholars who do tawaqquf. So they say, for example, we're not sure. We don't really know, what Bitcoin is all about. It seems to have haram elements as well as halal elements. And this position of neutrality actually seems to me like the majority position. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But many of the ulama actually hold this position of neutrality. For example, Sheikh Al-Khathlan in Saudi Arabia. Or for example, Al-Majma' al-Fiqhi, or Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami, the Islamic Council of Fiqh that are scholars from all around the world that gather, I believe, yearly to discuss various topics of fiqh that are linked to modern issues. So they all say that they have not yet come to a conclusion.
فأقول حيث أنه ليس هناك الأمر ليس بهذا الوضوح، فأنا لم أفتي فيها ومتوقف عن الفتوى فيها لا بالحل ولا بالتحريم.
ولهذا فأنا متوقف فيها، لم يتبين لي فيها قول راجح.
يقول أكثر من سنة وأنا أنتظر منك فتوى العملات الرقمية، أرجو منك الجواب. لا أعلم. خلاص سنتين ما يضر.
And then you have the scholars and ulama that take the opinion that it is permissible as long as you use it for permissible things and in a permissible way. And their main evidence is that in the chapters of fiqh, in the mu'amalat, in the transactions, the original principle is that everything is halal until proven haram, until proven otherwise. So if you want to say that Bitcoin is haram, then you have to prove it without a shadow of a doubt. And they say that those who say that it is haram, their evidence is not strong enough.
وعلى هذا فإذا كانت هذه العملة عملها مباح فهي مباح، وإذا كان عمله محرم فهي محرمة.
أنا كنت ممن يحرم التعامل بهذه العملات الرقمية، لكن بدا لي والله أعلم أن هذه العملات الآن أصبحت معتبرة بين الناس، والناس لو اعتبروا قطعة قماش عملة لصارت عملة.
So according to them, it is not far-fetched to say that Bitcoin is a currency. And Bitcoin is becoming more and more accessible and accepted by the common folk and sometimes even by the governments now that are starting to accept it. On top of that, you find some of these statements of the Salaf, such as Umar and Al-Imam Malik, that say that anything that is accepted by the people as a currency to buy and to sell with, then that is a currency. And they even have a statement where they say if camel skin was to be accepted by the people as a currency, then it would become an accepted currency. They also mention that all of the arguments that are used to say that it is haram can also be used for fiat currencies, for the dollar, for the euro, you name it. What is the euro or the dollar backed up by nowadays? 50 years ago, you could have said, okay, they're backed up by gold and silver that is in the main bank or whatever, but that's not the case today. Everybody knows that. This paper money that we are using technically in and of itself has no value. The only reason it has value is because in our head, it has value. And we have accepted this paper money as currency. And the fact that it's not government regulated or not regulated by the banks, is that actually a good thing or a bad thing? That remains to be confirmed. There seems to be some evidence, some kalam of the scholars that go into the direction of the government having to accept something as a currency. But it is interesting to note that some of the fatwa actually say that if the government has given its backing for that particular cryptocurrency, then at that point it becomes permissible. So some of these fatwa do exist.
ولذلك أخي الفاضل، إذا أقرت الدول والبنوك المركزية اعتمدت هذه العملات الرقمية، نعم.
Al-Muhim, many have asked me for my personal opinion. And to be honest, in the midst of all of these opinions, I don't see why my personal opinion would hold any weight. But for those who are curious about what I think about all this, then I would say that, look, based on speaking to some of my friends who studied economy in university, if we can confirm that Bitcoin is an accepted currency, which seems to be the case, and that it is not regulated by the banks, but rather it is an independent currency, then to me the question is very simple. Meaning the question to me is not even whether it's permissible or not, but rather the question is it wajib or not? Are you telling me that now we have an option to circumvent the banking system, which is based on what? Everybody knows it's based on riba, on interest, which is haram. And the only reason we have bank accounts and use credit cards and debit cards, etc., is because for the most part we have no choice. So now you're telling me that possibly there is a halal option to this without being inside of the banking system? Again, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, the scholars will confirm this, but if we can say that, look, it has value as a currency, and we can say that it is not part of the banking system, and if we can say that it has no haram elements in and of itself, yani if the haram elements are only linked to use and the such, if we can say all of that, then I think that the fatwa of the mashayikh, little by little, will go to permissibility, and then maybe and possibly to wujub, to obligation. And in fact, we are starting to see a trend where many of the ulama who did tawaqquf in the beginning are now changing their opinion slowly and moving towards permissibility. A great example of this is Sheikh Al-Barraq. Sheikh Al-Barraq in Saudi Arabia, who is from the major scholars, actually issued a fatwa saying, I changed my original fatwa from tawaqquf and now I say that it is permissible. So bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, the research will continue, the scholars will start to position themselves even more in the future, which is why Sheikh Al-Khathlan himself mentioned that maybe in the future things will become much more clear and he himself will also change from tawaqquf to a specific hukum.
ولا ندري ربما بعد 5 أو 10 سنوات تصبح من العملات السائدة في العالم فلا نريد أن نتعجل في إصدار الحكم.
So we will see what the future holds bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, but at the end of the day, whoever uses Bitcoin and trades in Bitcoin based on the fatwa of a scholar who believes that it is permissible, and he truly believes, the person who does this and follows this fatwa, it's not only out of desire, and he truly believes that the sheikh makes sense, the evidence has been brought, and that this is probably closer to the haqq, there is no problem, as we can say at this point that it is a legitimate khilaf until everybody takes position from the ulama and it becomes a consensus. But as of now, I cannot say that this is the case. So we will see what the future holds, inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum jami'an. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.